look at that. Look at that beautiful gray that's in there. 3 methods. I got too much alcohol on there. 3 different ways that I start paintings using alcohol. Welcome back to Pastel with Avon. Today, count them, 3 ways to use alcohol in your underpainting. But alcohol is one of those tools that will give you terrific different effects depending on what you use as the underpainting. Just to be right up front, there's no single right way to use alcohol with soft pastel. But I'm going to show you these 3 methods. One is with charcoal, and another is using black and white pastels, and the third is using soft pastels with alcohol, but using the colors rather than trying to create a monochromatic underpainting. But there's no one right way to do this. Not everybody uses alcohol the same way. There's more than 3 ways, but these are pretty common methods that a lot of artists will use. Let's start with the most common way that I start paintings, using vine charcoal. First approach is probably one of the most common. It's just using vine charcoal. Vine charcoal is the best because it moves. This is the one I personally like. But I would use the others also. We begin by sketching lightly. Asking ourselves, where are the darks in this going to be? Want to know where the light is coming from and establish some of those tentative shadows. And I'm thinking in large masses here. Nothing sharp, no sharp edges. Just trying to get a design in kind of a no-tan sketch. At this stage, everything's loose. Charcoal's great because, as you saw, it's fast. It's simple. Without adding alcohol, I can move this around. We dip our brush into the alcohol, and it's nothing fancy at this stage. We start to not soak it where it runs down. We want to just get enough alcohol on the brush in order to dissolve some of this charcoal and move it around. See that skinny little tree? I'm going to turn it into something that's got some midtones into it. We're trying to dissolve enough alcohol that we can drag it into some of these other areas. There's some left on there. And look at that. I can darken the top of the sky. I can come into here and darken some of the ground. What we're after is we're trying to create a sketch that has our darks, leave some areas like watercolor wash, leave some of these areas light and not touch it at all. But by dissolving this, we're able to reach out and start to design some of these features. Still keeping it all very broad, no real detail here at all. Some trees off in the distance with some middle ground. By going into the darks and then dragging into some of the lighter areas, we can create some of these halftones that we're looking for. And we'll follow those as we apply color later. You can see how using alcohol with charcoal, depending how much you go back into these dark areas, sometimes you have to let it dry and reestablish some darks in there. That would be my next step after this dried. But look at this area here. This has kind of gotten blocked up. Let's say I had light coming through there. I can add enough alcohol to make this start to dissolve, and I can move that dark to where I need it, up around these edges and where the sky might be coming in. Let's say I wanted light in this area. I just add more alcohol. Even though this dries, it will still be movable to the touch, and this will blend with some of the pastels that you would put on later. Get those trees off in the distance on another hill back there somewhere. Charcoal here in this area that would be light, and move it up into the distant tree line. But you can move it around also with your hand. Just to recap, the first way, charcoal with alcohol, gives you great mid-tones, sets a mood, and it's easy to do and easy to follow. Because it stays on the paper, some people don't like that. They don't like that charcoal bleeding into the pastel they put on top. Personally, I don't mind that at all. In fact, I like the way it tones for later layers, but not everybody does, and that's okay. Some of these halftones down in here, the charcoal gets real feathery around the edges too, and you get some of these shapes in the skies. If you don't like the second method, if you don't like the way charcoal reacts when you put pastels over those charcoals, black and white, or even black and white pastel, if you're used to working with pastel, it's a great way to get started trying to use alcohol as a wash. Now I'm going to do the similar sort of block in using black pastel instead of charcoal. Some artists don't like the way that the black charcoal reacts to pastel. It's a little bit different than pastel, and this is a black pastel. And who said you couldn't use black? But we do the same sort of thing. We take the black pastel and we just put a light application. You don't need to have everything on here real heavy. And again, looking for the direction of light, we'll do something similar as the last time. I'm focused on value placement because we're going to turn those halftones into something, but we're doing a little differently here. I'm mixing a little bit of this white in some of these areas that are in between the shadows. So we already start to see some of the value placements and light versus dark. I'll put some white in there. You can't see it, but it's going in. And we can put a little bit of black over where the corners and the sky would go up over us. And we can do a little blending with the whole knowledge that when we add the alcohol to this, we're going to be getting some grays that we couldn't get in areas maybe with the charcoal. One of the advantages of using black, if you haven't done alcohol underpaintings before, is that you are used to how pastel interacts with itself as opposed to the charcoal. Remember, I put white there, so I'm already starting to get a gray. You can do a little more painting with the white and the black to create some gray areas and not rely so much on the charcoal until you get to try to fill in these gaps. Now, just as before, we're going to start with our darkest areas. And the first thing you'll notice is that if you get areas that have a lot of pastel on them, that there's a little bit of surface resistance. You have to do a little bit more dabbing, use a little bit more alcohol to wet it and to get it to dissolve than you do with. But now, there's my dark. I've got it wet. Watch what happens. The magic starts to happen when you start to go out into where you put white. It's a whole lot easier to create those gray areas and that distant tree line. Remember, the tree line bled into our sky quite a bit. You can see some of that resistance up in there. I want to get more white dissolved and drag it back up in there. You see, we get a little bit more of a monotone painting. This method makes a great foundation for color. It guides you along on your values. I'm not working as hard as I would if I was going to paint over this to create those values, but you can take more time than this and really stretch out that value painting and make it make sense so that you know when you start to paint color over it. Now, I got that in there. I got to wash that out, and my brush got dirty, so I've got to wash that out. And the way you would do it is just like before. We just add more alcohol and it starts to dissolve, and we can spread that halftone where we want it. I'm going to dab this in here. I'm going to build this tree more than I could with the charcoal. And the same with this tree here. They look like little sticks. They're just little abstract figures. But that's what we're after. We're not after a lot of detail with the drawing part of it. We're trying to wet it down and use the the pastel. And if you're doing charcoal, it's the same process. You're trying to use that charcoal, but here we're trying to use the pastel, the white we added, to create some mid-tones, darker shadows being cast by those trees. So our light source is coming in here, and they're just big shapes. There's no sky holes or anything in there, but you have to add that as you build this painting. So I could keep working on this and make some more grays. I could get the white out of there. The nice thing is that if I wanted to get that white out of there, I can just take a rag and pull some out. So if you get a half tone that's too blocked up and you want it lighter, just keep adding the alcohol, use the rag. The rag actually helps. I use a rag a lot of times. I'll sometimes wipe a painting down in order to get the streaks. But you can start to manipulate this with a brush, a rag, your fingertips. Once it gets dissolved, you've got a lot of options. But you can see we're starting to get a bit of a halftone. Again, so if I wasn't just demonstrating 3 different alcohol methods, I would show you a little bit more finish on this. But you see, you get the idea. What's really nice about using this method is that it lets you work in values. It lets you put color over those values. If you get this painting, this underpainting done close enough in values, then when you put your pastel color on top of this, you'll know whether you've got the right valued pastel or not. So by taking this to a little bit more, keeping the detail out of it, but just big large areas of values, we can then paint color over this and have an advantage. And the third way is to use color soft pastels and add alcohol to create color washes. It is super for creating contrast, working with complementary palettes. If I put that on too heavy, then it's going to create all sorts of problems, and by the time I break through the surface tension, then I will have created enough alcohol on there that it would run down. This is a great method when you're wanting to work with color temperatures, when you're wanting to create mood and create an overall harmony maybe with colors, or maybe even just using contrasting colors, so that when you're done with this wash, you've basically got some sort of almost a watercolor wash underneath to follow. You get to put in these little place setters that of color that you can follow later. So we just put this on very lightly, not very heavy. Again, we're not after a lot of detail. We just want to create some areas of color that we can go into. And I'm not varying the color. I'm just going to use some dark color values and some light color values and create a sense of color for this piece. Here's some of my lighter values. I like to sometimes put pinks in the sky and peachy salmon colors. So I'm going to leave a little area white here because I want to drag these colors up in here and try to keep this area a little lighter. And again, there's a middle ground, there's a foreground, and these trees go along the edge. I'm not too concerned about those shapes. I'm more after trying to get this color wash and get a sense of what this will be. If I wanted to put a place setter in there to remind myself that there is a middle ground, or that I'm going to put some edges that are a little brighter on some of these dark shapes that are trees, I might add some additional color. When I use color, it's like one of my favorite things to do is in the color areas, I start where the lights are going to be. Because your brush, as you try to do this before it dries, the alcohol dries, it will start to get polluted with some of these darker colors. And if you try to do your whites last, like you would paint, that's why it resembles watercolor washes. You have to stick in your lights first and then go to your darks, or switch brushes a lot. But as you can see, this dries real fast because this is 91% alcohol. If I had a 70%, or I use water even, you could use water instead of alcohol. If you find it in the beginning, before you get the alcohol on there, and it's like, oh, this is drying too fast, then a 70%. And if it still dries too fast, then try to go to water until you get used to it. Once you get used to it, you'll start to say, oh, I know how to push this stuff around. I know how to make my lights where I want them. I know how to mix the tones. Mixing this violet with some of those yellows, I'm getting some of those grays that will eventually, look at that beautiful gray that's in there. I'm getting some of those grays naturally coming through, and it's a basis for future painting. Now there I got too much water, I got too much alcohol on there, and I dissolved and it ran down. That's what I get for talking to you guys when I'm trying to paint. Once you get the hang of it, you'll know how much is too much. You'll know when, oh, I can add more and get some of that out that dripped down or whatever. Now, I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to reestablish that tree and some of this area up in here. It's not completely dry. You can work wet into these, into alcohol, and that's another method for another video. But you see a little bit of it stick here, and this is that tree that I got too wet, and we want to get more shape in there. I would continue to work on these trees and the middle ground and the sky and establish the design of this piece a little bit more than what I am. The same with the other two methods, but I'm just trying to get you to get a sense of how you start out. Those other methods too, you can reestablish your darks. You can put tree trunks in. And the more coats that you put on in different layers, the more shapes you'll start to get inside these bigger shapes. So the important thing to remember is with color that you're establishing a mood early. You're also establishing strong color statements early. You have to know what palette colors you want to pick. If it's going to be traditional blue skies and greens, then you'll use those colors. I find this method works really, really well when I'm wanting clean, crisp colors, where the other methods work really well for tonalism. They work really well when I want the colors to harmonize and blend and fade into one another. At least try this once and let me know. Come back in the comments and let me know how it worked for you. The more you try these things, the more you experiment, the more you'll start to get comfortable. And you may find that, like me, I like to use multiple methods. But you may find a favorite that works best for you. A lot of artists do. If you found this helpful, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And we'll have something good for you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.